Most people don't think of investing as something dangerous. They think of it as progress, improvement, a step forward. They picture charts climbing gradually, accounts expanding, a future that feels more secure than today. On the surface, it feels responsible. But stability rarely collapses loudly. It erodes quietly. And erosion in investing doesn't begin with a crash. It begins with a misunderstanding, the belief that the goal is to make money, when the first goal is actually to keep it. Before strategies, before performance, before predictions. There is one rule that sits underneath everything else: preserve your capital. Because without it, nothing else works. On the surface, investing feels like growth. But markets do not reward optimism, they reward structure. I've watched intelligent people lose years of progress, not because they lacked knowledge, but because they underestimated risk. In New York, overseas, different cycles, different headlines. The pattern is always the same. They focus on profit first and survival last. That order quietly destroys them. When someone begins investing, the first question is predictable. How much can I make? It feels ambitious, forward-looking, hopeful. But it's incomplete. A better question is quieter. What happens if I'm wrong? What happens if this position moves against me? If the timing is early? If the market stays irrational longer than I stay confident? Losses are not rare events. They are structural. The only uncertainty is not whether you will lose. It's how large you allow that loss to become. And that difference determines everything that follows. Most people see capital as a number, a balance, a percentage, a green or red screen. But capital is more than money. Capital is time. Capital is flexibility. Capital is the ability to step back instead of react. When capital is preserved, options remain open. You can wait. You can reassess. You can allow volatility to pass. But when capital is damaged significantly, behavior changes. Every opportunity feels urgent. Every decision feels like it must repair something. Pressure builds quietly. And pressure distorts judgment. Not dramatically, subtly. Failure in markets is rarely explosive. It is gradual. The sequence is familiar. You start with discipline. You take measured risk. Maybe you're right a few times. Confidence builds. Then one trade moves against you. Not catastrophic, just uncomfortable. You hesitate to close it. You rationalize. You give it more room. It moves further. Now the loss is larger than you planned. Instead of reducing exposure, you increase it. Not because you are reckless, because you want relief. Then another loss appears. At this point, the market doesn't need to do anything dramatic. You are already unstable. This is how capital disappears, not in one collapse, but in a series of emotional decisions. Most people define risk as volatility, sharp swings, red days, uncertainty. But volatility is movement. Risk is fragility. Risk is placing yourself in a position where one outcome matters too much, where a single decision affects your emotional state, where one loss influences how you behave tomorrow. Professional investors do not try to avoid losses. They try to make losses small enough to ignore, small enough to learn from, small enough to move on from without behavioral damage. That is structural strength. New investors don't focus on profit because they are greedy. They focus on it because that's what they're shown. Success stories, screenshots, momentum. Very few people share drawdowns. Very few highlight months of inactivity. Very few admit how often discipline requires doing nothing. So expectations become distorted. When reality slows down, frustration sets in. Frustration leads to forced action. And forced action increases risk. The emotional driver isn't greed, it's impatience. And impatience compounds losses faster than volatility ever could. Here is the mathematical truth most people underestimate. Losses are asymmetric. If you lose 10%, you need 11% to recover. If you lose 30%, you need 43%. If you lose 50%, you need 100%. Large drawdowns don't just reduce your capital, they increase the pressure required to restore it, and pressure changes behavior. The deeper the drawdown, the harder it becomes to remain disciplined. This is not dramatic, it's structural. Capital preservation is not conservative thinking, it is strategic survival. There is another form of capital that rarely gets discussed: emotional capital. Your ability to remain calm, your ability to follow your rules under stress, your ability to accept uncertainty without forcing control. When financial capital declines sharply, emotional capital declines with it. You begin to second guess. You hesitate when you should act. You act when you should wait. That deterioration is subtle, but once it begins, consistency disappears. That is why professionals design systems to protect psychology first. Defined risk, measured position sizing, pre-committed exits, not because they lack conviction, but because they understand human behavior. A calm investor with moderate knowledge will outperform a stressed investor with high intelligence. Over time, discipline compounds. Emotion compounds damage. Some of the most analytical people struggle in markets because intelligence can create overconfidence. Overconfidence increases position size. Larger positions increase emotional exposure. Emotional exposure reduces discipline. The market does not reward how much you know. It rewards how consistently you behave. And consistency requires survivability. Markets are always moving. There is always a headline, always a reason to act. But activity is not progress. Sometimes the strongest position is restraint. Waiting protects capital. Waiting protects clarity. Waiting protects neutrality. Most damage occurs during urgency, rarely during patience. There is a difference between controlled loss and structural damage. Small losses are tuition. They mean you tested an idea, you respected boundaries, you exited when the thesis broke. Large losses are trauma. They distort perception. They create hesitation. They alter behavior for months, sometimes years. The objective is not to avoid loss. The objective is to prevent damage. Investing is not exciting most of the time. It is repetitive, measured, often boring. But boredom is stability. Boredom means nothing is forcing you to react. Compounding does not appear dramatic in the beginning. It appears slow, invisible, almost underwhelming. The investors who experience its power are usually the ones who protected capital long enough to allow it to work. If you remove all noise, investing reduces to 3 principles: survival, discipline, capital preservation. Everything else, strategies, asset classes, timing, depends on these. Markets will always remain unpredictable, but how much you risk, how you respond, and whether you remain in the game long enough for probability to normalize, those are decisions, and they matter more than any opportunity. Before entering any position, ask, how much can I lose without changing my behavior? Not how much can I gain? How much can I lose without urgency, without emotional reaction, without the need to recover quickly? That number defines your structure. Most investors discover this threshold emotionally. Professionals define it in advance, before chasing returns, before reacting to the next headline, before comparing yourself to someone else's highlight reel. Pause. Ask one question: does this decision protect my ability to keep playing? If the answer is yes, you are aligned with long-term survival. If the answer is no, the opportunity is irrelevant. Capital is not just money. It is optionality. It is composure. It is time. And time is what allows compounding to work. Survive first. Stay disciplined. Preserve your capital. Everything else can wait. If this perspective resonates with you, this channel is built for long-term thinkers. Measured decisions, professional stability, financial survival. Because in markets, the loudest voices rarely last. The disciplined ones do. And durability always begins with protection. If you value long-term thinking, measured decisions, and protecting what you've worked hard to build, subscribe to Financial Survival NY. Like this video if you believe capital preservation matters more than chasing headlines. And in the comments, tell me, what topic should we break down next? Risk management, position sizing, market psychology, long-term strategy. This channel grows through thoughtful conversations. Because in markets and in life, The ones who last are the ones who prepare. I'll see you in the next discussion.